Good morning. Well, it's a real pleasure for me to be with you all in New Orleans. It's a privilege to follow the panel that you just heard from. It addresses one of the obvious, important, even critical issues of our time. And I want to build on that by addressing some other issues that I think are also important for our time, because everywhere we look, we're seeing issues in the technology sector. We're seeing issues that result from technology. We're seeing, in effect, the need for change. One thing that we've become accustomed to in the United States is hearing the phrase prosperity by zip code. It is striking in an era of, in many ways, great economic prosperity, strong economic growth, and even low unemployment, to see many pockets where people are not doing nearly so well. I can give you one interesting example from my home state because I think it speaks to every state. In Washington state, the county, King County, where the tech sector is based, has an unemployment rate of 3.4%. But across the state, in a more rural part of the state, there's another county, Ferry County. The unemployment rate in Ferry County is 16.6%. Think of that. 3.4% in one part of the state, 16.6% unemployment in another. It's just one example of how, in many ways across the country, some people are being left behind. And I think for those of us who are connected with technology, it's important for us, like the rest of the country, like the world, because this is happening everywhere, to ask why. The more we look at this, the more we've come to the conclusion that there are two technology divides that are exacerbating other divides that we see across the country. There's the digital skills gap, and there's the broadband gap. And we need to learn more and take action on each of them. Starting with the digital skills gap, it's amazing to see what has happened to jobs across America since the turn of the century. They become more digital. The digital content in more and more jobs has grown. And in fact, jobs that have more digital content pay better than jobs that don't. But look at what is happening to some of the divides that we care about in this country. Think about the gender divide. This graph shows you the number of computer science graduates coming out of colleges and universities every year. It fell in the early 2000s. It has rebounded, but not for women. Even after this growth, the number of women getting a computer science degree from a college or university is only 2/3 of what it was in the year 2003. It's exacerbating the gender divide. Now, to some degree, it starts way earlier than college. One of our challenges as a nation is that we have 42,000 high schools in America. But last year, the number that offered the advanced placement course in computer science was only 7,665, less than 20%. And it's even more striking when you start to look at the distribution of participation. This shows you what's happening in high schools for young women and young men. There was a big step forward last year to get more young women into computer science in high school. That was good. But after that big step, where are we? Only a quarter of the people who took that course were female. That is another step that is exacerbating, it's increasing the gender divide. And it's not just gender that we're talking about. Look at what it's doing for the economic divide. Look at what it means in terms of whether you go to a school where you can take computer science. It actually depends on your zip code, your economic background. And look at what it means for the racial divide. Underrepresented minorities now account for 30% of the American population, but even after some big progress last year, they only accounted for 20% of the students taking AP computer science. And it's not only about gender and race and economics, it's also about geography. Look at what it means for the urban-rural divide. If you were in a suburban school, you had a better than 50% chance of being able to study computer science. but if you were in a rural school, it was less than a third. Clearly, we need new solutions. What we need to build, what we are building is a national movement for computer science education. In some ways, it needs to start and has started with changes in public policy. 5 years ago, there were only 12 states in America where your computer science course could even count to your high school graduation requirement. Today, that's up to 35. But there are still 15 states that in effect discourage students from studying this fundamental field for the future. And when we look at the number of states that have now set standards for computer science, it's only 16. We need state governments to act. And then we all have a role to play, to get out and to encourage more students to consider this field. And that's what we're doing. That's what I had the opportunity to do in Brooklyn just a month ago with a school based entirely of young women. It's what an organization like Code.org is doing with its Hour of Code. It's what groups like DigiGirls and Girls Who Code are doing in such an impactful way. And then we need to address what is really the biggest challenge of all, growing capacity in schools. That really comes down to training teachers. Our schools have many great teachers, many great math teachers, many great science teachers, but they didn't go to a college or university at a time when people studied computer science. So we need to get out and work with teachers. That's what we're doing at Microsoft. That's what many companies across our industry are doing. Through our Microsoft Philanthropies Technology, Education, and Literacy in Schools program, we're today in 344 high schools in 29 states. There are 1,000 volunteers coming from over 500 companies participating in this, and by this September, we'll all be in over 500 high schools across the country. This is the kind of step that we need to take to build participation and then take that into universities so that we can build an industry that is more representative of the country and the world that we serve. But that's only half the problem. There's another part of the problem as well. It's the broadband gap. Let's face it, broadband has become the electricity of our age. It is the future of medicine. It is the future of education. It is the future of small business growth. It is even the future of farming. You cannot participate in the 21st century economy and all the opportunities it provides unless you have access to broadband. But today in America, there are at least 25 million people who lack that access to broadband. Some of them are in major cities, like here in New Orleans. We have major cities in the country where more than a third, and in one case in Detroit, more than half of the urban population lacks access to broadband. In part, it's an economic issue. In part, it is another area that is exacerbating a racial divide. As you can see here, the people who lack access to broadband are far more likely to come from a lower income bracket and far more likely to be from an underrepresented minority. But there's another huge part of the broadband gap as well. It too is about geography. Because of those 25 million Americans who lack access today, 19 million live in rural counties. It's not a question of money. There is no broadband access available for them to buy. Recently, we've been studying where the gaps exist. We've been studying how long it takes for a web page to download as one proxy for low broadband access. We've been comparing our data with data from the FCC and other sources, and then we've been comparing it to unemployment rates. And what we have found is that there is a 90% correlation between what appears to be lower broadband access and higher unemployment. It validates once again what so many people see every day. It is harder to grow a business, it is harder to grow an economy if you live in a place that broadband has not yet reached. That's why we've called for a clear national broadband goal. We believe that this country can close completely the broadband gap in rural America by 2022. It will build on and require the use of hybrid technology. It will require new kinds of partnerships. We'll all need to do more. It's why we at Microsoft launched last summer what we call our Airband initiative. We pledged that we would partner with companies in the telecommunications space to bring new broadband access to 2 million people by 2022. It will not solve the entire problem that this country faces, but it will make an important contribution. It's why 2 months ago we announced in partnership with a company called Packerland Broadband new coverage for 50,000 people in Wisconsin and Michigan. It's why we announced last week with a company in Virginia, Declaration Networks, new coverage that will reach 65,000 people on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay. If there is one thing that inspires us more than anything else, if there's one thing that I think should inspire all of us who are connected with technology more than anything else, it's the opportunity to see what this means for people's lives on an individual by individual basis. It's the opportunity to see what it means for communities. Let me show you a short video that will let you see just that.
Just because you live in a rural area doesn't mean you shouldn't have the opportunity to be connected.
That was about, I'd say, 9th grade year is when I began taking college classes through dual enrollment. And that requires that you upload papers and assignments to the college as well as to the high school. The internet was terrible at home, so I would have to do my assignments really early, like a whole month early.
He had to submit a lot of his paperwork. It's just gonna sit there and just spin and spin and spin.
You know that the deadline's coming, and you know you need more research, and you know it's not enough. It's a struggle.
In the beginning of the semester, one of the questions I asked the students, just a show of hands, who has internet access? And typically, just a few. Right there, that tells me that I have to be a little limited in any kind of homework assignment I give. It's a handicap for teachers in the 21st century. I mean, here we are, hands are kind of tied.
The homework gap is a major problem for our region. And the exciting part is that Charlotte and Halifax County, our 2 pilot areas, are no longer going to be left behind in this digital divide. TV white space is a new technology that the FCC has allowed vendors to transmit broadband connections wirelessly over previously unused airwaves. Rural markets specifically, it is critical to have access to that lower band spectrum that allows internet providers to serve that last mile affordably. The goal is by fall to have about 250 connected, and we're hoping to have 1,000 families connected soon after that.
It's going to open the doors to economic development and allow the people in our area to have access to a world-class education.
It was a dramatic increase in productiveness and efficiency.
Dylan has a small antenna at his home, which is connected to a TV white space device, turns on his laptop, connects via Wi-Fi.
I don't know the tech side. All I know is it works.
Now that I have TV white space internet, I can use the cloud, and my grade actually shot up going forward with TV white space. I got high B's and A's.
This is where I grew up and I love it. I'm a country girl. Just train our kids so they can stay home and have that knowledge, and then they can bring it back here so that our community can grow.
TV white space held up very well with my college application. Once I graduate, I'll be going to attend Old Dominion University in the fall, studying computer science. And I'm very excited to go.
The real message is this. This technology can create opportunities for kids of all economic backgrounds, all races, men, women, boys, girls alike. and we need to get it everywhere. And the thing that I hope that we'll remember is this. Think about what digital skills mean to the future. Think about what broadband means to the future. And think for a moment about this country's past. Because it was in the early part of the 1800s that this country resolved that it would make public education available for free to everyone. It started in Massachusetts in 1835, and it literally spread across the country. And that decision changed the nation. A century after that, the leaders of this country recognized that they needed to do something very similar, and they needed to do it again. It wasn't about education. It was about electricity. When Franklin Roosevelt was elected president, he toured the southeastern part of the United States. He traveled along the Tennessee River. And what he saw was what the absence of electricity meant for people who lived there. And one of the first steps he took when he took the oath of office as President of the United States was to resolve that every American would have access to electricity. So twice in our past we have done this. We did it for education. We did it for electricity. Now another century has passed. It's a new technological age. We are the people who see that every day. I think it's up to us to take this message forward, to do what we can to make the contributions where we should. Because if we're going to have a 21st century that creates the kind of opportunities for people of all genders and races and economic backgrounds that this country has created before, if we're going to take this legacy and sustain it, if we're going to pass this along to the people who will follow us, we need to do that again. And we can. Thank you very much.